I work night shift at a rural vet clinic. What this kid brought in is not an animal. Last summer, some Czech tourists brought in what they thought was a house cat. They found it lying on the side of the road and didn't notice the tranquilizer dart sticking out of its back. Thinking it was just a cute kitty, they Googled the nearest vet clinic. They didn't realize it was a lynx. And to be completely fair, they didn't really make it all the way to the clinic. They managed to pull into our driveway before the wild animal woke up. It panicked, scratched them up badly, and made a dramatic escape through the car window. Animal control never found the lynx, but they didn't look very hard either. There are only 8 police officers in our town. I know all of them, if not by first name, then definitely by last. When I called them after the lynx incident, it was mostly to share a laugh about how clueless some tourists can be. I've been working in veterinary care for almost a decade, and that was the only time I'd ever contacted the authorities. Until tonight. Tonight, I'll have to call them again. And they'll have to call for backup from Poprad or any other nearby city that can spare the personnel. Tonight, I'll have to call the cops, and this time, there won't be any laughter. Night shifts at the clinic are usually quiet. Most of our clients live out in the villages. They know their animals well enough not to need help at midnight, and even if there's an emergency, they usually won't risk driving down winding roads after dark. Most of my night work involves restocking supplies, doing paperwork, and monitoring any overnight patients. It's been a slow week. I finished the paperwork in 15 minutes and didn't need to restock anything. Our only overnight patient, a prize pig from a nearby village recovering from a skin condition, was heavily sedated and clearly not waking up anytime soon. When the storm rolled in, I settled into the idea of a calm, solitary night. The roads outside town are dangerous in daylight. When wet, they become almost impassable. As the rain tapped against our tin roof and thunder echoed through the valley, I rested my head on the desk for a quick nap. A loud buzzer jolted me awake. Outside, standing in the downpour beneath the edge of the roof, was a red-haired teenage boy. His old bicycle leaned against the clinic door, and in his hands he held a worn-out milk crate. Still groggy, I went to the door and tried to make sense of what he was saying. He was frantic. He pushed the crate into my hands and insisted that the animal inside was harmless, that I should take care of it. He said people would come looking for it and begged me not to hand it over. It was a good animal, he kept repeating. The boy was clearly in shock, and I was still half asleep. When I invited him in so we could talk, he hesitated, glancing repeatedly at our security camera. He just kept repeating that the animal in the box was good. I heard a strange, raspy purring sound coming from inside the crate. As I noticed it, the teen jumped on his bike and rode off into the storm. The whole interaction felt surreal, but I was too dazed to question it. I called after him for a phone number or name, but his skinny silhouette disappeared into the night. The strange purring from the crate kept going. Driven by curiosity and concern, I carried it into the operating room. I expected a cat, maybe one that had been hit by a car. But when I opened the lid, what I saw defied all understanding. My startled cry woke the pig. From inside its cage, the large animal looked up with heavy, blinking eyes, once, twice, then slowly drifted back into its sedated rest. The prize pig slipped back into sleep, but I was now wide awake. And shaken. The creature inside the box was unlike anything I had ever encountered in my studies. It resembled a cat, vaguely. A feline shape, yes, but with 6 legs, textured scales instead of fur, and an overgrown patch of grass and flora blooming from its back. There was nothing natural about it. Yet, once the initial shock passed, my veterinary instincts took over. The creature's limbs twitched. Its slitted eyes fluttered, struggling to stay open. It was clearly in distress. Even faced with something utterly outside of known biology, my training kicked in. Its scaled body trembled with fever. It was hot to the touch. A thermometer confirmed the elevated temperature, and I quickly prepared an antipyretic. Carefully, I injected the medication into one of the creature's front limbs. Moments after the injection, its strained purring faded into quiet, and its breathing slowed to something calmer. But that didn't bring me peace. As the professional reflexes faded, my mind returned to the strange, unnatural thing now resting on the table. I had no idea what to do. No one I worked with would be awake at this hour, and even if they were, none of them would know what to make of this. I realized I couldn't be alone with this creature. I needed someone, to ground me. With the reptilian feline lying motionless, I rushed to the front lobby to grab my phone. When I returned to the operating room, the creature hadn't moved, but something about it had shifted. The growth on its back, flowers and tall stalks, no longer looked dried out. As it breathed deeply, slowly, I could see the greenery gently swaying, responding to each inhale. I called my boss, hoping for some explanation, some support. But the call rang endlessly, unanswered. In a moment of doubt, I turned on my camera, trying to prove to myself that I wasn't hallucinating. I snapped a photo. The image was clear. The thing I saw with my own eyes was right there, unmistakably strange, on the screen. I stared at the photo, trying to make sense of the moment, until something pulled my attention away. The click of the camera had stirred the creature. It slowly pushed itself upright, showing visible effort. Its eyes, pale brown and shaped like a goat's, locked onto me. I didn't move. I couldn't tell whether it felt curious, calm, or something else. The creature didn't move its body, but the strange flora on its back began to shift. A large bud, resembling a rose, unfurled at the center. From within it, thin green tendrils emerged, slowly writhing, like vines moved by an invisible breeze. They didn't move aggressively, but with each breath the creature took, the tendrils extended further. One gently brushed against a nearby metal tray, knocking it off balance. The tray clattered to the floor with a metallic bang. That crash didn't alarm the creature, but it startled the pig. The sedated animal blinked awake and looked around, eyes groggy, until it saw the six-legged being across the room. Then, panic overtook it. The pig began to squeal and thrash in its cage, desperate to move away from the sight. Its body shifted back and forth, rocking the metal bars. Even under sedation, fear gripped the animal completely. No medication could ease the intensity of its response. The six-legged creature didn't seem to appreciate the pig's reaction. The moment the squealing began, the reptilian cat leaped down from the operating table and darted toward the high shelves. Without disturbing a single item, it gracefully slipped across the metal frames, found an air vent, nudged the cover loose, and disappeared inside. Its sudden exit did nothing to calm the pig. The poor animal continued thrashing in its enclosure, and although I was just as shaken by what I'd witnessed, I was still physically fine. Relying on instinct, I crouched beside the pig to try and soothe it. That's when I first heard the buzzer. At first, it barely registered, I was too focused on the squealing animal. I tried to speak softly to it, calm it down. But when the buzzer rang again, followed by the unmistakable sound of breaking glass, I knew something was wrong. The front door had been broken into. I left the panicked pig and rushed toward the lobby. For a fleeting second, I hoped it was the teenager returning to explain everything. It didn't occur to me that whoever entered might not be friendly. But I should have considered that possibility. Standing in the lobby were three towering figures, each dressed in rugged rural clothing. Though they varied in appearance slightly, they shared the same hardened demeanor. In their hands, they held old hunting rifles or shotguns. And the moment they saw me, I knew I had become the center of their attention. They said nothing. No matter how many times I asked who they were or what they wanted, they stayed silent. Instead, they motioned with their weapons, directing me toward the far wall of the room while two of them moved deeper into the clinic. The man who remained with me just stared. Not directly at me, more like through me. His expression was empty, as if his thoughts were miles away. None of my pleading reached him. He was unmoved. Beyond the lobby, I heard the pig's panicked squeals rise again. This time, however, they were cut off abruptly. A loud blast rang through the building, and everything fell quiet. That sound triggered pure survival instinct in me. I started to beg. I told the man I wouldn't say anything, that I'd forget everything I saw, that I just wanted to leave in peace. But his empty stare and steady grip on his weapon told me my words were meaningless. Then one of the other men returned. His expression was as grim as before, though his weapon now hung on his back. In his hands, he held a photograph, an image of the six-legged reptilian creature. Without a word, he shoved the photo toward me and gestured urgently. His mouth opened and closed as though trying to speak, but there were no words. I realized, with a jolt, that he couldn't speak. He had no tongue. No visible teeth. Just the shadowy shape of a damaged mouth. Despite the terror I felt, I tried to explain. I told them about the teen who had left the crate, about the creature's condition, everything I knew. But they didn't react. The photo stayed pressed in front of my face. The weapon never dropped. Their silence was louder than any shout. Above us, something shifted in the air ducts. Neither man looked up. But when another blast echoed from the back of the clinic, both turned their heads. In that fleeting moment of distraction, I wanted to run. To escape. But my legs wouldn't move. Frozen by fear, I stood motionless as the man with the photo slung his weapon back into his hands and headed toward the sound. The one beside me turned back slowly, his gaze falling on me again. The tension in the room was unbearable. His grip on the weapon didn't ease. From the direction of the surgery room, I heard the sound of metal trays crashing to the floor. Then a loud blast echoed through the hallway. A second followed. And then, silence. The bald man's rifle was still aimed in my direction, but his hands had started to tremble. His gaze drifted toward the corridor, searching for any sign of his companion. He waited, tense, expecting the other to return. But he didn't. Instead, something rounded the corner that shook even this seemingly unshakable figure. Tendrils, long and vine-like, emerged from the hallway, slithering into view like the arms of some deep-sea creature. When I had first seen them sprouting from the back of the strange feline, they had moved gently, like tree branches caught in a breeze. But now, they snapped and cracked through the air with force. In a blur, the smooth green vines wrapped around the man's wrists, yanking him from his stance and slamming him to the ground. The floor tiles split slightly beneath the weight of his fall. He thrashed and resisted, but it was no use. Two more tendrils coiled around his legs, pulling him back toward the dark hallway. I caught a glimpse of a red smear near his forehead before his large frame vanished around the bend. His cries, raw and guttural, rose through the silence of the clinic. He struggled, calling out with sounds of desperation, until his voice faded to a faint, broken whimper. Then, from the hallway, I heard a strange, sloshing noise, as if something heavy and wet had been spilled. I didn't dare move at first. But crimson liquid was beginning to seep across the floor, creeping into the edge of the room. The cage where the prize pig had been held was now twisted and buckled. Whatever had happened, the animal had not survived. Its enclosure was bent from the impact that had ended it, but the pig wasn't the only one caught in the chaos. The three men who had entered the clinic had encountered something they couldn't fight. Their presence, once dominating and threatening, had been erased in a way that defied understanding. The surgery room and hallway were unrecognizable, transformed into a scene of destruction that felt less like aftermath and more like a warning. The floor, the walls, all of it was stained. Scattered around were unidentifiable remnants, pieces that once belonged to people. It was no longer a clinic. It was a place marked by something far beyond the natural world. And the creature? Gone. The window stood open. Rain fluttered in gently as the wind moved the curtains like hands brushing through tall grass. The cat-like being had vanished, disappearing into the night like the lynx from the summer before. All that remains now is the responsibility of making the call. This time, there will be no laughter. No amused conversation about confused tourists or quirky emergencies. When the authorities arrive, they won't find just another strange story to pass around. They'll find a nightmare. An unspeakable scene. And it will follow them long after they leave, just like it will follow me.